By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
All right, I'm sitting here with Brother Azriel Devine, son of Rabbi Robert Azriel Devine, leader of the House of Israel of Mississippi. Am I correct?
House of Israel Hebrew Culture Center. Yes, it's what it's called.
House of Israel Hebrew Culture Center.
Yes.
So, my brother, can you give me a little introduction? You know, a little introduction about yourself and your journeys. Where were you born and your journey in this way of life?
Absolutely. Well, I was born in 1956 in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. I was born into this way of life. My dad came out of the Church of God in Christ movement, Christian thing. He realized that we were the Hebrew Israelites from his studies in the Bible. He realized that they were worshiping on the wrong day for the Sabbath. He realized that the Sabbath was on the seventh day and not the first day of the week. So when he started teaching this in his congregation as a Church of God in Christ minister, his superiors were not happy with it at all. And so he got tossed out of that religious group. And that's when he started to found his own congregation based on the teachings of Torah, based on the fact that we were the original Hebrew Israelites and that the Sabbath day was on a Saturday and not a Sunday. Okay. So by the time he got married and had me, that's what I was born into.
Okay. Did he have a teacher, per se, that guided him in this understanding? Because you hear stories of people, they kind of just get it, and then you have some people along the way help them out. Did he have a teacher along the way?
He did. He, of course, figured a lot of it out on his own because he was a minister.
Oh, okay.
And right, like today, there are a lot of Christian groups that are finding out that we're the real people, and they're finding out that this first day of the week is actually not the Sabbath, right. And so on and so forth. But he did at one point came in contact with Rabbi Abihu Rubin, who had a congregation of Ethiopian Hebrews in Chicago. And this is before I was born. He had started taking up studies with that group and learning a lot from that man. And there were other teachers that I don't even know about. Okay. But if one day you might be fortunate enough to go down and interview him at his kibbutz in Mississippi.
In Mississippi. Oh, so he has a kibbutz in Mississippi.
Yes.
Can you explain to people that might not know what a kibbutz is?
A kibbutz is a system of living where everyone lives on the same compound. They have them on the same land, and they have them in Israel. It's more of a socialist existence of living, and they raise crops, they raise farms. They have a farm down there. People live together. They share everything together, and that's what a kibbutz is, based on the kibbutzim that are in Israel.
So, what made him decide to do that? Like, at what point did he decide to get up and say, "I'm going to buy this land, and the congregation is going to all go down there and live down there"?
Okay, so now we're getting a little bit ahead of the story.
Okay.
But backing up a little bit, rewinding, right. We started out in Chicago on the south side. House of Israel.
All the gangs and everything going on all around you guys?
Well, when you're a kid, you're oblivious to any danger or anything like that going on. It's just the world when you're like a little kid. You're not, being recruited or doing anything like that. Right. So, but yeah, they have, Chicago is notorious for a lot of street gangs. But you know, I'm not going to delve off into war stories like that. But we grew up on the south side, right down the street from Stateway Gardens, which was a big housing project complex that had a lot of crime problems in that area. Chicago has a lot of, just like New York, public housing projects. At that time, Stateway Garden, you had Cabrini Green, which is where Good Times was filmed about that housing project. But today, they tore all the projects down, so we don't have them anymore. But we were in the south side of Chicago, and we had our temple over. We lived on the top flat of you know, the storefront and apartments above. Okay, so the storefront on the bottom was the House of Israel Hebrew Culture Center, and we lived upstairs above the temple. And we had a very good, strong, because a lot of people that came. Now I need to mention that not only did my father come out of the Church of God in Christ, so did Rabbi Hodges and Rabbi Nolan. And they all at first had a congregation together, but subsequently they all went out on their own to form their own congregation. And Rabbi Nolan had a congregation on the north side, and he did live in the Cabrini Green area, which is the near north side. And Rabbi Hodges had the Hebrew House of Israel Temple of Faith. So that were two other congregations, their kids, and my family. We were all close. I grew up with the Hodges kids. We grew up with the Nolan kids. And so the interesting fact about you asking the question about his teachers, because he did connect with Rabbi Reuben, and I understand now since being here in New York that Rabbi Reuben was a direct connection to the Rabbi Wentworth Matthews here in New York, but he had ventured out into Chicago. So one day, as the story goes, there was this Jewish guy who had the tattoo. So he was from the concentration camps. He rode past on the 35th Street bus, and he saw the banner House of Israel with the 2 Star Davids and the menorah. And he told my father, once he finally met him, that I used to ride past there every day, and I wonder who in this neighborhood, who's Jewish in this neighborhood, because it was a solidly black neighborhood. So he actually got off the bus one day and walked over to the door and knocked on the door and rang the doorbell. And my daddy came down the stairs and he answered the door, and the little Jewish guy said to him, he says, I'd like to speak to the rabbi. And my dad says, you're speaking to him. He goes, oh, so you're Jewish? He goes, I'm a Hebrew Israelite. And he says, well, do you mind if I come in and talk to him? So, I invited the guy in to go talk to him, and he went up the stairs, and he says, he was asking him a few questions, do you know about this? Do you know about that? And so, to make a long story short, my dad invited him. He came back several times. He used to come like once or twice a week, and they would talk about kashrut, they would talk about tzitzits, they would talk about arba kanfot, they talk about candle lighting, and all of these different things that...
It's kind of testing your dad out, right?
No, he was actually, because what he finally said to him, he says, if you go among other Jews and they ask you these questions, these are things that you're going to have to know. And so some of the things he did know already, because Rabbi Reuben is a very mainstream type rabbi. He was not, from my impression as a young adult, he was not a camp style person, not that camp style, I say that in quotes. But he was more mainstream in his avodah and his worship. So my dad knew a lot of it, but a lot of stuff my dad picked up some good information on. So I think it was at that point that he decided that he wanted his kids to have a Jewish school education, because our community didn't have a school for our kids. We were going to public schools, which is, going to it's pulling you in a different direction. It's polarizing you from what you're being brought up in. So he wanted to more centralize our experience with a Jewish education. And so he went to Congregation Rophai Zedek, 5200 High Park Boulevard in Chicago. And this is a conservative, strict conservative Jewish congregation. The rabbi there was named Rabbi Simon. And he said, he went there to make an appointment. A lot of things transacted. He finally had his audience with the rabbi, and he says, I want to send my kids here to this school. And he says, are you Jewish? He says, yeah, I'm every much as Jewish you are, except for I'm black, and you're white. And the guy says, okay, I'll tell you what. We're going to convene a Beit Din. We're going to have about a panel of 6 or 7 rabbis. Would you be willing to come back and answer some questions? He said, sure. So a couple of weeks later, he went back, and there were like 7 or 8 Beit Din rabbis for their Beit Din for this community of conservative Jews in Chicago, and their decision was going to be final as to whether they're going to let us in the school. So they started asking him questions, and my dad quickly realized that a lot of these questions were the same questions that that European Jew was bringing them up to date on. So he just like boom, 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 knocking them out the park. Every question they asked, he came up with perfect, pristine answers. And a lot of the Jewish rabbis were really astonished by this. And of course, a lot of stuff that Rabbi Reuben was teaching them was coming up too, and the Minghogs and the different types of things that you can imagine. A lot of the questions were the same 72 questions that you would ask any Jew that, or any person that was wanting to be converted even.
Right.
But my dad was not willing to go through conversion. But they was asking him these questions left and right. And so the rabbi said to him, Rabbi Simon talked to the other panel rabbis. They excused my dad, and they talked about it. And as the story goes, most of the rabbis said, sure, no problem. He's a Jew as far as we're concerned, except for one dissenting Jew. And he says, well, he still has to go through, even though he was circumcised, they still want him to go through a prick, which is a separate thing, and all of that. And he said, well, the questions that we ask him are the same questions that we ask every Jew or person that wants to become a Jew. So the way we figure it now, if he wasn't Jewish before, he is now. Right. And so he didn't have to go through any other formal transformation. We were allowed to go to school in the fall, I believe it was 1965, me, my 3 brothers, and my younger sister. And we all got our Jewish educations there. We graduated there. And I had my bar mitzvah there, which was quite an ordeal because it was the first African-American student from the school to be bar mitzvahed at this congregation, which is predominantly, or I should say, all white. And I think I showed you the newspaper clipping. It reflects the time. It says, bar mitzvah plan for Negro Boy 13. We pull that article out all the time. We look at it and we laugh at it, So
your education in that school went from elementary school to high school?
Yes, elementary to high school. And then I went, then the thing switch when I went to a full-time yeshiva high school in Chicago called Ida Crown Academy. Now, these were not conservative Jews, which tend to be a little more liberal. These were Orthodox Jews, and they are really can be pissy,
right? If
I could use that expression.
Right.
So, and I've heard
you had a rough time.
Right, and I heard that a lot of our people here that went to the Orthodox schools in New York had that same rough ride that I had.
Right.
So I only lasted 1 year in that school, and my dad decided to pull me out, and I went to public school from there.
Right.
So but
how was that transition from coming from this environment to the public school system?
Oh, it was like, the public school was a whole different, totally different. Everything is secular compared to what we are taught in Torah. They don't care about kashrut. The cafeterias, man, are serving pork, as much pork as they are serving kosher food, even more so. So I had to take my own lunches and stuff, and we didn't eat out the cafeterias. Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, in the high school, you're gonna run into some battles,
right?
Being different,
right.
And
so it's interesting because your father, he put you in this conservative Jewish school, but he was still keeping the messianic element. How did that work out?
Wow. Well, that in itself was a transformation. Okay, so we as students of that school, we had to go to Shabbat services every Sabbath morning to their congregation. And we went over there to their congregation, and you know, and I had become over there. They had a junior congregation because the adults were in the main sanctuary. They had a separate sanctuary where the kids would lead their own services. So that was really fascinating to me, and you know, when it was my turn to lead the service, I was really proud to be able to do that. And of course, they don't adhere to the New Testament, and I actually, as a child, was starting to believe that the way that we should go is the way of Torah, and I was becoming more confused about why are we doing the New Testament?
Right.
But, you know, I can't really, you know, confront my dad like that and say, why are we doing the New Testament? Because I'd end up with a 5-knuckle shuffle. So, you know, it's just always...
still a very real reality.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't confront him on it, but I knew in my heart I was feeling more, quote unquote, Jewish than I was his interpretation of Judaism, which is they read the New Testament. They acknowledge they don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in a man being God.
Okay.
But they think that the New Testament is the Word of God.
Okay.
Okay.
I get what you're saying.
Right. So, but I've had this conversation with them as
they don't believe in Jesus, or they don't believe that Jesus is God, or they believe in Jesus being a prophet.
They think that the person that was called Jesus, they think Jesus is a transliteration from Ea and Zeus to represent a person that was a Christ or an anointed person or an anointed prophet, but that prophet's name was Emmanuel.
From Isaiah chapter 7.
Right, and we know that's not,
right, we know that
there's no connection at all.
Right.
So, and, but I've talked to him about it as an adult, and I just have to say, you know, I made my points very well, but I have to say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
So, but hopefully at some point in time, you know, God's going to open their eyes and they're going to see and they're going to become the regular people of Torah that they should be. That's my hope.
So your Abba is still alive?
He is still alive. He was born in 1926, so that makes him 92, I believe, years old right now.
Same year my grandmother was born.
Yes. So he precedes a lot of things. He goes back to the hand wringer and the washing board right. Because we grew up with those same apparatuses when we were little kids, because they couldn't afford their modern things. So we had I know what a washboard is and how you get in there and scrub your clothes on it.
Put soap on it.
Put soap on it. Yeah. Then when we got real fancy, we had a washing machine where you had the hand wringer.
to rinse the clothes out. Yeah.
Right, and then you hang them up to dry.
Right.
So, but so he goes way back.
He has a lot of history.
He's got 60 years in this one. This is 62 years in this one congregation, and so many other people that came out from under him. He not only had the congregation in Chicago, he had one in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And one in Gary as well, Gary, Indiana. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So a lot of those people came out from under him that are still operating in those areas. Also in Covert, Michigan, he had a congregation. Yes.
So in being in Chicago, the South Side, there were also other groups of Hebrew Israelites out there. I don't know if you know too much of the connection between where Ben Azar came. The congregation Nasi Yaakov.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Did your father get along with him? Did they?
Man, I could tell you a story. I'm going to tell you this one story. But Nizakin came in, I believe they came out of New York, they came to Chicago.
Right.
And
they were affiliated with that.
They were affiliated with one of the street gangs there.
Right.
And so, you know, word was out, but my dad and these other rabbis weren't aware of it, but the word was out that they were there to, you know, shut down shop and shut down the groups and bring everybody under one banner.
Right.
So my dad, Rabbi Nolan, and Rabbi Hodges all went over to have a sit down and meeting with these people. And this is my dad telling the story. And from what I could gather, they got in there and they realized something wasn't right. This don't really look like a mainstream type of a religious facility. And so when they got in there, the security people, whoever it was, they locked the doors and they put a bar on top of it. And they sat down, and the head guy was laying down the law. This is where it's going to be. You guys are going to jump in with us. You know, you're all going to be under one banner, BINAH Zaken, yada, 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 yada. The rabbis, my dad says, we were sitting there and we didn't know what to do. And he said the Spirit came to his mind and spoke to him and says to agree with him. So my dad says, okay, well, you know, we have to talk to our congregations first, and we have to get approval for this all to be okay. But, you know, we hear what you're saying. Let us go back and get back to you. And he says, okay, it worked. They let him go. And they ain't been back there since. And, of course, with that being the case, they organized. My dad was, and you might have heard of this group, my dad organized from those three groups, an organization called the LOJs, which is the Lion of Judah.
Right.
And that was the security wing of the House of Israel, the House of Israel Temple of Faith, and Rabbi Nolan's group. So if they had any problem with these guys, they weren't going to just, you know, go down easy. And so that's what the origins of that. Because I know here now, I see the LOJ here in New York, and I see the Lion's Paw, everything here too. After that initial meeting, they stayed away from those guys.
And they never pursued it. Nasi Yaakov never pursued it, right?
Not from my knowledge, not from what I knew.
Right.
Nothing else came of it.
Okay, that's unfair. Let me see. So after your dad, he creates this. At what point did he get to where he said, all right, I'm gonna get this kibbutz, we're going to get some land, or am I missing some other history?
So then he had a really successful congregation in Chicago, like over 200 families. They had a beautiful building that they had bought on 87th Street, and it held a huge amount of people. His people from Gary's only 15 minutes from Chicago. He closed that down and they started coming to the Chicago. The Indianapolis group, he sent a minister out to them once a week, and at some point that discontinued for some reason. And so he had several. He had a minister, Gaster Sample, was one of his assistants. And this is where I'm in college at this point, but this is where Rabbi Funay came in contact with my dad, because he was also one of his assistant ministers. And so he left Chicago to go down to Mississippi to establish everything, and he left it in the hands of Rabbi Funay and Minister Gaston Sample.
Okay.
At some point, I don't know how it all fell down. Of course, Rabbi Funay, like myself, had come into contact with a different perspective of our heritage, and it didn't include the New Testament or Jesus Christ or any of those things. So obviously, he's, at this point, going in his own direction.
Okay.
And so when I came back to my dad's congregation as an adult, we disagreed on it, and so I kind of walked away for a long time. I got married, and I went through some things, got divorced, raised my 2 kids, and so now, once my kids are grown, I'm coming into New York here to perfect my ways and study to be a rabbi.
Okay.
And But so he started his kibbutz effort when they were still in Chicago, and I believe that the assistant ministers he left there, they all put their money together. They bought like 80 acres or something down there in Mississippi. It's got a lake. It's got everything down there. And, I went down there last year and I came from Mississippi to New York.
Okay.
So I'm very well familiar with what.
How long has that been? That you came from Mississippi to New York?
I came from here in 2014. I came to New York. I've been here almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years.
Yes. And I've been right here at Shalom the whole time. I learned so much from here, from Rabbi Yeshurun Ben Levi. I learned so much from other brothers here just by talking every Shabbat. Gained a lot of information. I would say to anyone who really wants to get a perfected way of what Israelite life should be for African Americans or people of color, you got to come to New York. There's no other place. Even Fune came here to New York for a period of time to get to where he's at. So I would personally say that, you know, if you don't come through New York, you haven't experienced it fully yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you were speaking about the kibbutz. They bought 80 acres and they have everything down there. And about what year was that they made that move down there?
I'm saying it was like 1980 or 81.
Wow.
So they've been down there for quite a while.
40 years.
And when I've seen it when they first got it, and it was nothing but a house and land. Yeah. Now they have this beautiful temple that they built on the property, and they have people's houses that they're living in. They have their own source of water. They grow crops. They're looking to have livestock. They have their own lamb. So now I hear they have a chicken coop. They have their own chickens.
Right.
So they're getting to the point where they're going to be self-sufficient one day. And the interesting thing about why they're doing this has to do with the fact that they believe that sooner or later there's going to be a mark of the beast where nobody will be able to buy and sell, and people that are messianic will understand that doctrine. From the Old Testament, it would be similar to what you would call the day of the Lord.
Right, the day of the Lord. Right.
So I don't know if there's ever going to be a beast or a mark or anything like that, but it's not part of my understanding of Torah. I do know that when it says in Zechariah that when God's feet hit his holy mountain, it's going to be fire on the mountain.
Right.
And another prophet says that we have to come through the fire.
Right.
And then another prophet, I believe, said that there's only going to be a third of Israel that's going to come through the fire.
Right.
So
those are all the things, but nonetheless, they have a land down there.
They have land down there, and that's their salvation. They think they believe down there that those who are not preparing for the mark of the beast are not going to be saved.
Right.
And I believe that no matter where you are, if you don't come through the fire, you're not going to be saved.
Okay. So so how was that relationship with you and your dad?
A little rocky at times, but I always yield to him because he's the elder. He's the father. I don't never make too much of a fuss about it, although he gets highly upset with me because of my new-founded ideals. But I think in the end it's going to all come about to the goods.
But they're really not that new, because you said you were having that concept from when you were in school.
Right. I also went to Camp Ramah and to the summer camp there.
Right.
And this is one of my first experiences of after every meal we were singing Birkat HaMazon.
Right.
I hadn't seen Beth Shalom is the first congregation of color that I ever been in that did Birkat HaMazon. We do it every Shabbat after eating, and it's like, wow.
Took you back to your childhood.
I'm happy as a lark, I'm just like, a duck taking the water. This is where I belong. So that's why I've stayed here, because I like the minhag here at Beth Shalom.
Okay.
It's mainstream.
There was a song that brought you back to your childhood that no one else sings?
Oh, the Birkat Hamazon. Shir Hamalo Beshuv Adonai Etziva Zion Hayenu Chechomim Ajimale. That song, every day after every meal, when I was in the summer camp, it was a song that brought the whole camp together in camaraderie, and you came together and meshed with your friends, and that's what it feels like every week here at Bet Shalom. We're bonding every week. That song is a bonding song. You know, people are getting into it, and people are, you know, and it's like, and at the end we see who can hold the last note the longest. It's classic. I mean, you know, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is what really happens here, and that camaraderie is what people look forward to every Shabbat. So that's what we look forward to every week, is the camaraderie and the bonding, and it's something that's special. I've been to other congregations here in New York, but I don't identify, not to say that they don't have their own special ways of bonding, but I don't identify any other place like Bet Shalom I identify here.
Okay. So how is that dynamic as a child that comes from a position of a father who has so much influence, right? Because your father, doing this for over almost 60 years. Right. He's been doing it. He's been a leader of people. How is that dynamic with a child? You're his firstborn, or
I'm firstborn, and I always looked up to my father, and I always respected him because he, in his own right, for an African-American male in the 60s, had gained quite a bit of acceptance from the European Jews in Chicago. Right. And as I showed you a picture, he met with the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin. Right. At that time, he wasn't Prime Minister, but he was the ambassador to the United States from Israel. Right. And he, like I said, was a part of they didn't have the board of rabbis, but they had created, between him and the Beit Din of the conservative Jews, they established a board of black and white rabbis. Okay. Very, very unique, because you had Jewish rabbis on the board with black rabbis, which were like mainly my dad. Rabbi Hodges was on it. Rabbi Nolan was on it. There was another rabbi named, I can't think of his name, but he was on it as well. As about four, and then Rabbi Reuben, I think, before he had passed away, he was on that board as well. I don't think the board exists anymore. He started the United Leadership, the ULCHI, the United Leadership Council of Hebrew Israelites. Okay. And it had several different rabbis from all over. So now we have, of course, the Israelite Board of Rabbis, and some of the rabbis from Chicago was given honorary board status. I think Rabbi Hodges was listed as an honorary rabbi, and Rabbi Nolan as well. Interestingly enough, Nolan and Hodges were Messianic as well as my dad. However, Rabbi Nolan is no longer Messianic.
He's still alive also?
He's still alive. Rabbi Nolan is still alive. He was the youngest of the three, so he's only in his 70s. Okay. Rabbi Hodges is still alive. He's right up there with my dad.
And he's no longer Messianic also?
He is still Messianic. Okay. Nolan is the only one that has turned to strictly Torah and Tanakh. Okay. And we talk all the time, and we have both the same agreements and everything. Okay. I talked to Rabbi Hodges a couple of years ago, and I think he's teetering. I don't know, because we had an interesting talk. He said he'd like to get together and talk more about it, but right. So.
What about your experiences? What is your job here at Beit Shalom? Do you have a job?
Well,
what is it that you do?
I came here from Mississippi to New York. And when I got here, there was about a listing of 4 or 5 congregations. I think BINAH was one. The one in the Bronx was one. Mount Horeb. Also, Beth Elohim was definitely one. Beth Shalom was one. So I started calling each one, and I got no answer, no answer, no answer. When I called Beth Shalom, picked up on the first ring, and it was Rabbi Yeshurun. He says, yeah, come on down. Well, yeah, no problem. And so this is where I ended up, and I'm often thinking that this is definitely divine providence of how I ended up here, because ever since I've gotten here, I haven't missed a Shabbat. And as a child, you know, when you're like 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, in those prayers, if you don't keep doing them, you're going to lose it. And that's why having a school in our community is so important, because I went to college, and then I was a music major. I had I had a scholarship for music. I had a full ride scholarship for wrestling. My dad didn't want me to do athletics, which was the only point of contention when in my youth. My mother had to sign my papers for me to get on the wrestling team. So I'm on the wrestling team, and he don't know him now. He found out I'm on the wrestling team. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you now, if it's on a Friday night or a Saturday, you're not gonna participate. Fortunately, all the wrestling matches were on Tuesday and Thursday after school. And so I went to the city tournament at 135 pounds. I took first place. So me and the runner-up get to go to state for the state championship. And I had all these scholarships thrown at me, man. I was like, wow, this is gonna be... No, it was on a Saturday. You talk about somebody's heart dropping out. Oh. And that was really a sticking point between me and my dad. I said, man, this one Sabbath ain't gonna kill me, and rah, 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 rah. But, you know, hindsight being 20/20, he was right. I wouldn't let my kid do it either now as an adult. So, but you know, I was a jockhead. I like sports.
Right.
And and he was thinking, he always preaches from the pulpit, the only thing the white man think a black kid can do is run a ball, catch a ball, or hit a ball, or throw a ball. That's all he think we can do. Right. And so I got that preached to me for like 20 years, and it's like, that wasn't helping our relationship either.
So that's interesting, because you said that he preached that, right?
Yes.
That a white man thought. But so, do you think that they were looking for acceptance from the white Jewish establishment, or was it more of we trying to get?
I'm gonna tell you what I see. What I saw was, you know, the situation was a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde. Okay. Mr. Hyde was the guy that was taking his kids over to get that Jewish education. Dr. Jekyll is the one that's preaching on that we're the real people and they're da-da-da-da-da. And he was very much...
nationalistic.
Very much so.
Right.
Very much so.
For his people.
For his people, right. But he don't mind going to help take advantage of what they could get.
Okay.
So I think that's what got him in trouble with some of the white Jews in Chicago, because they had got, at some point it got back to them that, you know, this man is preaching...
Children of Israel are black people.
Right, well, the original people are black and the rah-rah-rah. That's why European Jews are slick. They'll say, okay, if you're not Kohen or Levi, everybody else is Yisrael. Now, wait a minute. What do you mean they're Yisrael? The only reason you're saying that is because you don't know what tribe they came from. And the only reason you don't know what tribe they came from because they didn't come from any of the tribes. You converted them.
Right.
So, you know, that's where we're at today. So we have to learn, I think, to be honest and straightforward with each other. If, you know, the Jews that are in Israel today and our people here in the United States are going to ever get on a footing where we could do something constructively, we have to be brutally honest with each other. And I don't think that a lot of the white Jews, they know what I'm talking about. I believe that at some point in time in history, maybe not in our lifetime, but maybe so, who knows, all of this is going to be hashed out, and everything is going to come back to where it is. Because, you know, the prophet Isaiah did say that God's house is going to be a house of prayer for all people. So I don't believe there's any room for prejudices, especially racism, because there's only one race. That's the human race. If you're a racist, you're against yourself. We're humans. The original people were humans, and hue means color, and a man is ish. And now that we're all in different hues, you're a kind of a human, or humankind. You have humans and you have humankind. So, and all people are children of God because they all came through the seed of Adam. And we are a chosen group. We are Israel, and the African-American Hebrew Israelites, also the Caribbean Hebrew Israelites, or the Hebrew Israelites anywhere are God's chosen people, and the original people are people of color. Hallelujah. So,
you also mentioned earlier, just to the contact with BINAH. How was that? Because he also comes out of Chicago. Your father's group and Rabbi Nolan and Rabbi Hodges. How did that encounter go? Do you guys remember that group?
I was very young, because you're talking about now, late 50s, early 60s. So I do know that my dad has mentioned BINAH's name. They all know him in Chicago. From some of his deraches that he's given from the pulpit. And he tells the story about when he was trying to, you know, convince everybody now there was the time to go to Israel. I do know that Nolan, Hodges, and my dad felt that it wasn't time yet. So subsequently, we do know that he did go ahead. He made it to Israel, and the rest is history.
Rest is history.
Yeah.
So, what are you working on these days?
Well, I'm working.
You guys have a.
We're working on a play that I wrote when I got my scholarship outside of wrestling was music and theater. So I went to school for music and theater and dance, and I wrote a play called Yehudit, and it's based on the Apocrypha account of her life and how she saved her people. And I got approached to do it for Rabbi Wentworth Matthews' weekend, and we're going to be showing that play. We're going to be doing that play on the 24th of June, which is this month, in the afternoon, about, I believe it's 3 o'clock. And
what's the location?
Location's going to be here at Beth Shalom.
Can you give us the address?
730 Willoughby. I think it's Willoughby Avenue. And so that's right here, and it's we promise to have a entertaining fair for everyone, and everyone is definitely welcome to come.
All right.
Other than that, I'm also finishing up my last couple of semesters of rabbinical school. I should be graduating in January, and I look forward to doing some things that that can be beneficial for our community. And also maybe building bridges.
Okay. So, Brother Azriel, Devine, thank you for this time.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Yes.
Most High bless you.
And you as well.
Hallelujah.